gezag van de rector en krachtens mijn recht zullen wij een paar minuten praten over een mooie proefschrift. Hartelijk dank aan de promotoren en de co-promotor voor de uitnodiging bij deze commissie te zitten. Geachte meneer de kandidaat, mogen wij nu in het Engels praten?
Yes, we can.
Prima. I'd like to ask you a bit about a very specific experiment that you did in chapter 4. In particular, I want to focus on figure 2, which is on page 79 of your thesis, and figure S1, which is on page 89 of your thesis. And in particular, I'd like to discuss the notion that you raise about, number 1, the concept of behavioral therapy in a mouse. And in particular, because particularly in figure 2, I find the result remarkable because I think statistically this is truly a rescue of the depressive phenotype that you see. In other words, in the normal condition, you don't see an effect, but that effect is highly specific for the social defeat condition in the behavioral therapy group.
Sorry to interrupt, but just for a reference, are you talking about the LTP experiment?
I'm talking about the LTP experiment,
okay.
Yeah. And in particular, the behavioral therapy group.
Yes, and what's your question?
So far I haven't asked one.
Okay.
Now, in figure S1, you clearly delineate that this adapted social defeat paradigm you're using has a substantial period of individual housing, 70 days. And so my first question is whether or not the individual housing, which is a component of the entire social defeat procedure, is a major contributor to initially to the phenotype, and whether or not the paired housing is a major contributor to what you're calling behavioral therapy, independent of the hourly enrichment periods that you described.
Highly learned opponent. Thanks for your question. It's a very good question. So in supplemental figure 7, there you see the effect of just individual housing on the LTP in these rats, and you see that individual housing per se does not have an effect on LTP. So that answers your first question, maybe that the phenotype that you see in figure number 2 is not just caused by the social isolation, but is caused by the combination of first social defeat and then social isolation.
Okay.
Concerning your second question, so the thing is that all control rats, they are housed socially, and if it's a form of behavioral therapy that...
So you say that the behavioral therapy condition is really the 1-hour periods of enrichment.
Yeah.
But is it not potentially the combination, or maybe even the majority of the behavioral therapy condition, the paired housing?
During the environmental enrichment, they are not pair housed. They are,
But that's only for a few days, right? Or it's over the 21-day period.
Yeah.
But that contrasts with the 70-day period of paired housing which precedes it.
Yeah.
And that condition's not specifically controlled for. Right? So you never have a social defeat group which gets social defeat acutely and then gets paired housing.
No, so that is a very relevant question, and the reason why we didn't include it was because it was known from previous studies where they social defeated rats and then kept half of them in social isolation, half of them in paired house, and then if you pair house the rats after social defeat, you get a complete remission of all phenotypes, so both of the anticipation towards sucrose, also of social behavior, and also the effects on LTP are reduced then. So that's why the reason we didn't include that group.
But then in that case, what does behavioral therapy mean? Because then I think I hear you saying that those hourly periods of enrichment over the 21-day period don't matter, because you would have seen a rescue of all of the phenotypes independent of that, if the paired housing alone was sufficient.
So you say that, yeah, so the pair housing would be a form of behavioral therapy?
Well, I don't know if I would call it behavioral therapy or not, maybe you would,
I think
the point is
that is a good point. So I think that actually could be the case. So I think one of the most important aspects of the behavioral therapy is that the rat gets an increased input from its environment. And it's also known that to increase plasticity, different mechanisms, both neurogenesis but also LTP in C3, CO1 synapses, increases if you increase environmental input. And whether this is done by a rich environment or maybe by social housing, I think social housing could also increase input for the rat, and that could also have similar effects, yes. Yeah. I think that is a very good point. Yeah.
The next question I have is that clinically, when you look in the clinical literature, it's quite compelling that the combination of antidepressant treatment as well as behavioral therapy is superior to either alone. And perhaps some investigators have even suggested it may be superlinear, may be synergistic.
Yeah.
Have you done that experiment? And if you haven't, what would you predict?
Yeah, that is a very relevant question, and it's also something I thought about doing. There's a couple of downsides to it. Is that by doing the behavioral therapy alone, we already get a complete remission of our symptoms. So if you would combine both treatments, you cannot improve it anymore. But based on the literature in humans, so what you see is...
But in the LTP, that's not the case, right?
Sorry?
In the LTP, that's not the case.
No, in LTP, that's not... So that could be... Yeah, so in that respect, it's known from humans. Well, they didn't do a lot of studies where they looked pure at activation therapy, but they did a lot of experiments where they looked at cognitive behavioral therapy combined with antidepressants. And there you see that the response rate can increase to from 40% to up to 85%. So I think it's a very effective form of treatment. And if you look at the mechanisms of both behavioral therapy and antidepressants, if I just look at the hippocampus now, just because my thesis is about that, both of types of treatment are known to increase plasticity, both on neurogenesis and in synaptic plasticity, and also in the formation of dendritic trees and the like. They both increase plasticity, so if you add them synergistically, they could have a synergistic effect, and I think that could even be more effective than a treatment with just antidepressants or behavioral therapy, yes, very much.
Do I have time for another question? Very small. Okay.
Question.
I'm going to ask you to answer very quickly.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll try.
You made the point that a lot of your thesis is about the hippocampus. And there is a very widely held theory that is supported by a lot of data, which is a systems consolidation theory, that the participation of the hippocampus is time-limited in experience-dependent plasticity. Yet you show a very enduring involvement of the hippocampus despite how long of a period of time, almost 13 weeks, that the entire social defeat procedure. So how do you reconcile that? And I think you have about 1 minute.
No, then I don't. It's a good question, but I think the hippocampus definitely also has some acute effect also on other brain regions, also for example on the dopaminergic pathway. So if you would increase plasticity in the hippocampus, it could also affect those pathways as well on the short term. So it could have short term effects as well, yes. Yeah.
can you leave it for now?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.